We are going to be going through the Agenda 47.
We made history for a reason tonight, and the reason is going to be just that.
End inflation and make America affordable again. Number 4, make America the dominant energy producer in the world. Stop outsourcing and turn the United States into a manufacturing superpower. Large tax cuts for workers, defend our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and our fundamental freedoms, including freedom of speech, prevent World War III, end the weaponization of government agencies against the American people, stop the migrant crime epidemic.
Just go a little slower. Well, yeah. How about we just kind of tick through them and keep it moving?
Welcome to the CashFlow Quest, everybody. We're here with Eldridge, Ben Schuster, and Blake, myself. Big win last night. Donald Trump won the election last night. And
red wave.
It was
a blue going on today.
It was a red wave. It was a massacre. It was pretty intense and fun to watch. But I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on all that, guys, and then we'll jump into some other stuff. But big current event today, so let's chat about it.
And I think just something to be said, because I know that we live in a polarized society and we probably have investors on both sides of the aisle. But when it comes to being professional landlords, one ticket was pushing something that really was going to negatively impact our investors' investments with us. I mean, there was major discussion on nationwide federal rent control, and a lot of different things, obviously, effect on taxes,
unrealized gains, taxes on unrealized gains. So there's a lot of chatter out there through a political cycle. But to your point, that's all massive risk for folks like our investors that are trying to plan for retirement. And so we take it pretty serious, and we'll try to be as unbiased as possible.
And we're not really getting into liberal issues or
right.
personal issues, but more from an economic standpoint. One ticket was definitely more favorable to our investors. So just
including ourselves, because we're investors, obviously, alongside of them. So it's important to us as well. Yeah.
And we're proud Americans and capitalists, and function in a capitalist world, free market enterprise. So
sure.
We love real estate and being a landlord. It's just it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, and Ben and I were saying as we walked in today, we were chatting earlier that we think now that Trump did win office, that people are maybe going to take more risk in investments. And this is kind of a more, what did you say?
It's the Trump rally. So we're in a risk on phase. And we'll probably have Tide, our policy expert, talk about some of the policy. And I'm not that guy, but I remember I woke up this morning. My wife woke me up around 4:30 this morning and said Trump won. And she scared the shit out of me because she's like, babe. And I got startled and I was like, what? She's like, Trump won. I'm like, okay. Is everything okay?
Yeah.
Is the baby still sleeping? Because I'm going back to bed.
Exactly. And, but I, as I was kind of getting ready this morning and thinking about what it means, it reminded me back in 2016 when I was sitting on the trading desk for BlackRock, and, Trump was not really known at the time. We're talking almost 10 years, 9-8 years later, we all kind of know Trump and understand him. But I remember the markets went heavily risk on, and you're seeing it today. The Dow's up 13,000 points. The Russell 2000's up 3.5 points. Everything is rallying. Right. And then you look into what certain, markets are rallying. We talked about this all last week. So it's all kind of coming through. So maybe we do know a couple little things, as far as one of the best performers today is a U.S. steel company. Right. And it talks about all that manufacturing onshore, and we talked about. But I think, building upon our last conversation, if investors aren't taking risk during these last, these 4 years upcoming, they're going to be severely behind the 8 ball.
Yeah.
And I felt like that because in 2016, I didn't really have two nickels that rubbed together, and I wish I would have taken more risk, because the folks that did really benefited greatly, just because of folks really building, consumer confidence and trusting that, Trump really cares about the markets and he wants lower inflation. He really cares about what interest rates are doing or mortgage. And I know he doesn't control a lot of these things, but, government, especially fiscal policy, you have a lot of levers you can pull to be able to then stoke excitement and then stoke, capital markets or stoke asset prices. So yeah, it's called the Trump rally, and that's a real thing. And so I think it's risk on right now.
All right, Tide, lay out the 100-day plan of what you're able to find.
So yeah, today, obviously, no matter what side you're on, we are going to be going through the Agenda 47 on Donald Trump's website, just kind of laying out what we probably are going to see. I know on his first time, his campaign strategist was Steve Bannon. I remember they had their war room set up and they had a big whiteboard. I think it was like 100 items that they wanted to do. And they literally were working on them and ticking boxes off. One thing that's unique about a Trump presidency, lots of politicians talk about stuff. Donald Trump, if it's on his 20 items, it will be touched. These are not going to be items that are not touched. He's going to be doing them. And so I think it's going to be interesting to kind of watch how that unfolds. There's a lot of really big things that are going to affect everyone in the country. I think it's going to be a pretty radical presidency. So we're going to kind of go through that today.
Is that why you have a large whiteboard in your office? Is that where you got it from? That you check off every day?
Great minds think alike. Yes, for those of you, everyone who works with me will know I keep a whiteboard in the office and I write out my week and check it off. I actually got that from Dr. Stephen Covey. Not the whiteboard, but the planning your week out at the beginning of the week. And that was in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Got it.
So that's where that comes from. And my mom was a big checklist person. She always had checklists everywhere. And, my chores were a checklist and all kinds of stuff. So that's where that comes from. But enough about me. Let's jump into
he's talking my language. I like that.
So I'll go ahead and read off the first 5 and then you pick off whichever ones you guys want to chat about. Does that sound good? All right. So number 1, seal the border and stop the migrant invasion. And these are his words, not mine. Number 2, carry out the largest deportation operation in American history. Number 3, end inflation and make America affordable again. Number 4, make America the dominant energy producer in the world by far is exclamation point. Number 5, stop outsourcing and turn the United States into a manufacturing superpower. Anyone you want to pick off first, and maybe you'll have.
Well, let's just really quickly address immigration. I think that ultimately, immigration is going to be a really interesting thing to see. The speculation is that it's impacting low income jobs, right? And we're seeing a lot of job issues. I also feel like we're starting to, for the first time, see where jobs are being affected because a lot of people's balance sheets that got so bloated from government handouts during COVID are out, and we're kind of starting to see the jobs report not look very good. So it'll be interesting.
The revised jobs reports. It's always the revised ones.
So, ultimately, I think safe and secure borders is something that every country is all about. We're like the only country where it's a big negotiation. I think it could impact, we're professional landlords. We might see this affect some of our low income. We inherit residents from other operators when we purchase. We might see a dip, but I also think we're going to see a lot of people that are looking for our product. So, it's kind of a give and take.
I think you need to have a smart immigration policy because that's how we win, is continue to bring on talent. But one of the things that Ohio senator that just won last night, it's Bernie, Moreno, right? So he's a Colombian immigrant. I don't know much about him, but I just listened to his speech. It was on the news. And he said, we want to invite migrants. We just don't want to be invaded, right? He's like, I was invited,
I
right? I thought that was a really good catchy, because you want to import talent, right?
100%.
So you just need a smart immigration policy. And most people, I think all people really know that to be true, but you just don't want people you don't know coming in waves across your border.
I think at the end of the day, one of the beautiful things about America is we are an immigrant community. Like everyone in America, with exception of a small percentage, immigrated here at some point in time. I have immigrants from Latvia. My grandmother and my great-grandmother immigrated here from Latvia during World War II. My father's mother immigrated here from Scotland. Immigration's a beautiful thing. It just has to, have some type of order. So let's keep going with it.
So let's maybe on number 3. So we kind of talked about, 1 and 2, end inflation and make America affordable again. Thoughts on that one?
Yeah. So what's interesting is I think he's going to do a lot of stuff that's going to help inflation. I mean, we're going to get into taxes, I'm sure, at length. But what's going to be interesting is, I don't know if you guys watch Valuetainment and Patrick Bet David, but he had a spreadsheet that showed interest rates from the Federal Reserve went up for the first time under Trump. So basically there was a gap of the Fed raising rates during Obama's administration. Then they raised rates for the first time in 8 years under Trump. Then they completely stopped. Right now we've seen a rate drop. So I do think that Trump's going to be battling the Fed. I think that that's something we're going to see in this presidency.
He's
100%.
more involved for sure.
Yeah.
Whatever that means, what does he net out of that involvement?
Right.
That's to be seen, but like he's more involved.
But what I'm getting at is I think we're going to see interest rates start to rise.
Oh, okay. You think he's going to lean on him and they're going to go the other way?
No, I think he's going to perform. So right now isn't a good thing for interest rates, right? Like they shouldn't be so low. They're at historic lows. Historically, you put your money in the bank. It makes you money. That hasn't happened in a long time in America. It's just free money being given away. And they don't want to do that. Well, the only way that they can start to raise rates is when the economy is performing. So I think we're going to see a lot of things to fuse into the economy to make it perform. And in turn, we're going to see the Fed start to raise rates.
Well, and this is a big macroeconomics math equation because then you need to start paying down debt. You know, like you got to put a lid on the money supply because like if you just create an economic machine that generates a ton of growth and revenue, at the same time you can't just throw government money at everything to do that without the repercussion of more national debt. So like it needs to be, in order to fully control inflation, he'd have to create an economic engine that is great enough to where you can actually start to minimize the debt.
Right.
I think that's going to be the trickiest one. That's why even some folks, other investors that I know that were, hey, we're leaning more, say Kamala Harris, and they say, I'd rather probably have Trump for some of the other reasons, but I almost want Kamala Harris because I think a Trump presidency is going to stoke inflation, right? Because he's so pro-growth. There's too many there's too many factors.
It's a big math equation, but he does get it. I do think he gets it.
He gets it.
And there's a lot of bad press around tariffs, but why, we shouldn't be getting taken advantage of on the world scale. So
and we're
100%,
outsourcing so much.
But and we talked about this with the iPhone situation, but regardless of what it is, if you add a tariff to something, it's going to be more expensive.
Right.
So we're going to see inflation, I think, on consumer goods.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see inflation on, we're going to see just rates in general inflate. But then I think the real big thing, and I'm sure it's on that list, is energy independence.
Well, it's number 4. So that's a great segue. So, I mean, I think one way, and we've talked about this, that that I think I didn't appreciate as much the last go around with him is that, the reduction in just fuel prices or energy prices and what that does to keep a lid on inflation.
For most businesses that are in the just normal production realm, whether it's construction or, delivering packages, it doesn't matter what it is, just getting that consumer good to the end user, it requires a ton of fuel and energy to where and it's probably one of their main costs on their expenses.
Everything's coming, in that Amazon package is coming through a truck, right? Whether it's an EV or it's a, it's a diesel rig, it's still going to get backed by fossil fuels, right?
We've seen major issues with energy in America. We've seen energy costs go through the roof. We know in California, we just had that net metering 2.0. Everyone's rushing to get solar in, got to lock in that low rate, which we did. A good friend of ours does solar, and we were able to get it in before the cutoff. But yeah, I think that's going to be part of the battle, right? It's like if we go back to $2 a gallon, you're going to see that affect prices. So it's like, how does it shake out? And I think that's like, you always see right before the presidential election, they're like, 100 economists have reviewed mine, and it's going to do this, and they do it on both sides, and there's two arguments to it, and I'm sure we're going to get into tax cuts and the Laffer curve and things like that, but it'll be interesting to see Fed tariffs, how that affects inflation, but then energy independence and a focus on massive growth and job development, raises in wages. At the end of the day, if Americans are making substantially more, the inflation, that's going to be a major battle on inflation if we see wage growth.
I think an interesting point of this whole dynamic as we're sitting here talking about it is the quality of the goods. We talk about the iPhone, but it's like I get a new iPhone every 2 or 3 years because it starts to fall apart. and just wear and tear. But like in the day, trucks and cars and all the products that were made here were super stout.
Yeah.
Because it was made with good products, good steel, good, like everything you touch was made pretty damn good quality and things would last a lot longer. So we've gotten into this weird trend now of believing that like these consumer goods are really important. But it's like if a phone was made and double the cost, but it lasted twice as long, it's just an adaptation to like the game and the market and how things are made and the quality of the end product. I heard yesterday that Apple moves 275 million phones a year. It's like, really, do we need those?
Wow.
Like maybe we just stop buying them for our little kids,
How much of that is intentional though? That's the other thing. Like, I think that there is big business in making things break at a certain point in time.
Well, I mean, think about it from Apple's position. They're constantly having to report earnings, right? So you constantly need to bring something to the market and sell, right? Because you're always trying to beat earnings and grow your shareholders' value and grow a company. So I don't think it's consumer greed. I just think it's just how capital markets work, and it's just a function of it.
Mm-hmm.
I got to get your take on what's going to happen to gold. I know we talked a lot on gold last week.
I think gold's probably going to go down now, short term.
Mm-hmm.
Short term.
Long term, it's still going to pace and hold its value. But it was the deciding moment. Last night was the deciding moment. To Ben's point, like if what people are willing to ride now, the market's in the bubble. Because like the markets are at all-time highs, and now it seems like they're just going to keep going.
I think so.
Ben, real quick, do you mind looking? What is happening with gold today? I want to see.
It's down. I already checked. Of course. Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah, it's down like 3%.
Okay.
But you don't buy gold to buy and sell it. It's not, when we talked about it, it's a store value. It's a whole different reason why we like gold. It's not.
Everyone was buying it up until Tuesday.
Yeah. Well, you're not going to go sell your gold now, right? No.
No.
It defeats the whole purpose why you hold it. All right.
We'll see. I'm gonna argue with you. I think we're gonna see a much bigger drop in gold than 3%. Over the next month, I think we're gonna
just short 3%
see a
overnight.
correction.
Yeah.
I think it's going to go down substantially, 10-ish percentage.
Yeah.
Percentage.
All right. We got 20 of these.
We're already through 5.
Yeah, we're at 5. Okay. All right, Jen. Stop outsourcing and turn the United States into a manufacturing superpower.
You
Thoughts
want me
on
to
that?
take this
Oh,
one?
I do.
Well, I mean, I think tariffs are going to be a big one. I think he's trying to in general, things are coming back, right? We're seeing the Taiwan semiconductor plant going in Arizona, and there's other factories, which I think we touched on last episode too. But bringing things back and just, I think, Trump especially, but, in the United States, we just need more jobs here, more capitalist mindset to where things like Blake was just saying are built better, stronger, last longer. Yes, they might be more expensive, but it just kind of brings things back to where we might outsource pieces of those or certain products of things, but to be able to build, here in the United States, certain things and with the tariffs, have the incentive for businesses near and far to have with that there, you might think twice and like, maybe we could find a manufacturer in the United States, not necessarily California. That's where I am, but in the United States. Right. And, my husband, actually, this is a good example because he builds a lot of baits and he outsources to Japan
like fishing bait, right?
Yes. Fishing baits, swim baits specifically for bass fishing. And, he's constantly working with Korea or Japan to like outsource this. And Japan is incredible in how they build things. Structurally, they do an amazing job building. And so that's one of the reasons why he really likes that. But he wishes that, we could have a manufacturer or something like that in the States that he could go to and fly to easier, to like meet with them and talk to him. And sometimes that's, even with all the technology and the Zoom calls and all the things that we have access to, it's still challenging at times.
This will bring the opportunity to like a Chris dynamic where you're wanting to build something here and it doesn't exist. He buys a couple machines and boots that up on the ground here and hires people here.
Right.
And the incentive sort of disappears from wanting to outsource it to Japan.
And if there's a tariff involved where now it's going to cost him more money buying those machines and doing it in-house and hiring that person to manage that function becomes a little more reasonable and probably less expensive depending on what the tariff tax is and what volume they're doing. So it's just interesting.
We've basically at the end of the day, I think the beautiful thing about America is capitalism. I think that it flourishes personal development and growth. And that's basically, it's a system. I know it's not perfect, but it's a system that rewards ingenuity. And what's happened since the 90s is we've outsourced that. So all the American ingenuity, thought, and great things that come with that capitalist mindset has now been exported to countries that don't feel the same way. And so I think a couple things. Number one, I think it's going to be great for security, national security, like the fact that we can't produce everything that we need. I know that there's a lot of, weapons manufacturers in the US, but we saw this in the supply chains where we were out of important medical supplies and just random things like that. Baby formula was one of the issues, just all kinds of weird stuff that happened during COVID. That's a problem. But also, we are getting forced labor products. We talk about rights for people here in the US a lot. And I think that we end up imposing an adverse reaction on others' rights by not producing things in the US. So it's like, how about instead of buying something for $5 that you could have bought for $10, you buy it in the US and, you don't have maybe children or people that don't want to be working in this forced labor camp kind of thing.
I agree. And the only thing that I would say on this is probably the most, this idea of onshoring is probably what I'm most excited about as our business, as real estate investors. I think it's going to drive a lot of job growth and wage growth, and then population growth equals rent growth is what I always tell, investors. And that's really what we look at a lot. We're always looking at, okay, where are jobs going? Where's manufacturing going? Where's going to be the wage growth? Because that's going to be the workforce housing that we're going to support. So this is like something personally, like we've been doing this, you guys much longer than I, but this is something that when I came on board with the crew, it's like, I really like Phoenix. I really like Dallas. I really like these business friendly markets that have a strong talent labor pool and are incentivizing these manufacturers to build here. I think that the folks that bet on it earlier and all the hedge funds are betting on it from a stock perspective. So you saw like the US steel company is one of the best out of, I don't know. I can look it up on the computer what the name is, but it's the top performer out of all the indexes today. It's a US steel company. So a lot of these hedge funds are making these bets right now, and they've already been positioning ahead of this. And today they're probably pretty happy around lunchtime in New York, like, oh, they paid off. But we can make those bets through real estate. They take longer to manifest, but they're more longer term cash flow oriented, wealth generation type of investments that's how we think about it. We're long-term investors, right? We're not thinking about a day trade. We're thinking about a 10-year trade.
And, ultimately when it comes to manufacturing, we're in manufactured housing, right? Our product is literally being built in the states we work in. And so to see that we're going to see an influx in that, you might see where manufactured housing costs come down.
Well,
right?
Come down or go up depending on where they source their products. Like they might have to source some lumber or something from here locally, more locally.
Right. But if we're sourcing it locally, I do agree with you. That's going to affect the cost. But like if we might see like a stem of people that currently are renting are now considering, I can't afford a conventional home and I don't love renting, but I just got a new job or I'm making more money than I made before. I'm having to pay less of taxes. My gas bills have gone down. Maybe I want to buy a house where I don't have shared walls. I have my own backyard and, they look for, at the end of the day, I feel like our product's a great place for young people to get in. It was interesting.
Totally.
Preach. Amen.
Yeah. Like you can't touch our $50 to $75 a foot.
Can't touch it.
Even the modular construction guys can't touch that.
Yeah.
No.
And I'll just plant the seed because this is a good one. One of the funnest things I heard through all the drama of the election was Elon and the government efficiency department that he wants to create with Trump and Ron Paul. And Elon thinks he can cut $2 trillion out of the national budget like right away. And so if they do, cut a substantial cost off of the government agencies, which I think there is a ton of capable cuts in this
maybe
government apparatus.
You mean these three letter groups that have 40,000 new employees?
Well, you name it. Like there's just so much kind of old school methodologies to just throwing huge labor costs at all these things within the government, and they're not efficient. And so it's like, the concept of what he shared was, it's basically the DMV on scale.
and we deal with that in our business all the time.
So if they make tremendous cuts or they decide like, hey, it only takes half the labor pool. I mean, with Twitter, he was able to run Twitter effectively on 20% of the labor. And it's like, that's going to shift the gears of the country, the pool of residents in each market, that if like there's big government contracts or government agencies that are based in Phoenix and Dallas and the markets that we chase, there's going to be some dynamic shifting on the employers. Mm-hmm. Which was, I think one of the biggest, if not the biggest employer in the whole country is the government.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah. Let's get through 6 through 10. Blake, you're on a roll, and some of these I think are probably best suited for you to touch on. So I'll just read out 6 through 10, and then we'll tackle them as we go. Number 6, large tax cuts for workers and no tax on tips. Number 7, defend our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and our fundamental freedoms, including freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the right to keep and bear arms. Number 8, prevent World War III, restore peace in Europe and in the Middle East, and build a great Iron Dome missile defense shield over our entire country, all made in America. I didn't realize he wanted to build an Iron Dome. That's pretty cool.
That's cool.
Number 9, end the weaponization of government agencies against the American people. And number 10, stop the migrant crime epidemic, demolish the foreign drug cartels, crush gang violence, and lock up violent offenders. So Blake, when I said that, I was more pointing to number 6, large tax cuts for workers.
I was going to say, just walk me through, just go a little slower.
Well, how about we just kind of take through them and keep it moving?
All right, I got, but the main first one to hit now is the taxes.
Right. Yeah.
So I love no tax on tips. I think there was another one.
Isn't he going to 15% corporate taxes?
I had heard that too. Is it 21? We should look.
I think it was on Lex Friedman where he was saying, he's like, I also like to sound a 15, I think who knows where
nice
he's
round
land.
Numbers.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be dropping taxes.
Overtime. It was no tax on tips and then no tax on overtime was a talking point that he recently launched.
Yes.
Oh, that's a new one. I haven't heard about that.
Well, it's like, overtime is a big deal. And it's like, it's critical for those pieces and you want to incentivize it. But then it's like, then they get crushed on the tax withholdings too. So
I think I want to segue into real quick the Laffer curve. So in economics, like it's in all of the, starter books, but basically Reagan had this really smart economic advisor who was the first person to come out and say, if you lower taxes, you actually generate more tax revenue. So where that comes from is like, if the American consumer is being liberated from large amounts of taxes on their goods, what do they do with it?
They go spend more.
More, right? And
makes so much sense.
I think it's a win for sure.
They spend more, they build more things, including companies or other, it just makes more sense. There's more money in circulation when that happens.
And it's going to piss off all of the old school industrialists, but like the waste that's in spending. So you have this tax revenue, but the waste that's in spending on the government contract side of like Air Force One, when Trump first took office the first time, it was like $1 billion. He's like, no, thanks. And he killed the order because it's like, you guys, this is crazy. Like you'd provide another plane for like a tenth of that price.
What did he do it for? I think it was $250.
I forget, but
he got Air Force One done, I think, for $250 million.
Okay, and they were going to prove it at like $1 billion.
Yep.
And so, like being from the private sector, he's just not an idiot when it comes to that government spending mindset. Which is honestly, I've always loved him just because he was not of government. Like he wasn't built on a government career. And so he has the optics of like, no, I think we can do this at a cheaper price.
Right.
And so I just love that whole concept. And so with taxes, it goes hand in hand. Like if we generate a lot more revenue for the people, then the people go out and spend more money and then pay more, it's like more, whether sales tax or they're making more. So their taxes is actually a little bit more in dollars to the government, but then you run the government efficiently. It would be such a better system.
And then even just on the tax piece of it, I don't know if I scrolled through, it's not one of the key items, but it has to relate to taxes. And what they're talking about is extending and reintroducing the 2017 Jobs Act and Tax Cut Act that he implemented. And like with that, this impacts a lot of our investors is the bonus depreciation, but it's any small business that's investing in equipment or even research and development, investing in R&D. You're incentivized to, invest and hire if you're able to then, get write-offs for that investment. And so it stokes all that growth as you kind of talked about. And so that actually went all the way through the Senate, had bipartisan support in the House this year to reenact it and bring it back up to, because it's tapering down, right? It expires in 2025 and it got shot down in the Senate. But now with, the
majority.
Yeah, the majority in the Senate, I believe the House now too. And then as well as, the presidency, I think that that's going to be one of the first things that they kind of focus on in the new year, because it had a lot of bipartisan support. It was, people were pretty excited about it.
And so the bonus depreciation, and hopefully it goes retroactive. That would just be so sweet to go back a year or two.
Yeah.
But that moves, it keeps money moving. Like, and this world is built on a flow. You don't want to just, incentivize people to hold money. Sure, everyone needs to save, whatever the old rule of thumb is, 6 months or whatever. But like after that in a business, you want to invest in the production, get newer equipment that is better, more efficient, and you keep moving money. And so the flow of that with bonus depreciation, you can buy tractors, equipment, the airlines can buy new planes. You can spend money, but then realize a tax gain on the front end, and that helps you deploy the capital. So it's really helpful. It'll help in our realm. It'll go back if it goes back to 100% depreciation. Mobile home parks will go back to one of the leading depreciation, forward real estate assets with just owning the infrastructure versus the improvements above the ground. So
what I've been hearing kind of talked about is an executive action to restore it to where it was at, and then them running it through because they want to enshrine it into law and not have the sunset periods that get smaller. So that's kind of, I definitely think that's on the radar. I know when I was watching the election correspondence on the Daily Wire, I think Ben Shapiro touched on that last night as one of the, when they're like, what's going to happen the first 100 days? It was discussed as one of the maybe first 5 things was talking about the Trump taxes. So I think that was a huge win, arguably his linchpin, I would say, of his, I think that the Abraham Accords, he had a few
Space Force. What about that one?
I think Space Force is mocked a lot, but I think
it's pretty cool. No,
I think that it's something we don't really know that much about, to be honest. And I think that they're putting satellites up constantly. Anywho,
all right. Well, we were getting there. Well, are we skipping anything if we go to space?
No, let's do it. Yeah,
the Iron Dome and all that.
Yeah.
So I've been doing research over the long haul, and obviously I'm a fan of Elon Musk for the awesome space stuff that he does. I have Starlink, like I follow some of those things. And then being in San Diego, we have friends of friends that in aviation that are working for like General Atomics and contractors of the government. So I just hear about products that they're coming out with or services that they're going to contract with the government. And there is now the whole need with Trump doing Space Force was that you can arm satellites now. So you don't need to drop bombs out of planes or shoot missiles out of planes. You could potentially launch attacks from space, from satellites. So there is this need now where it's like you can have satellites drifting overhead of our country, and the need for the Iron Dome is to protect us against attacks from satellites.
It sounds like a great idea. I mean, Israel's Iron Dome is, it's so sophisticated. It's amazing when you watch these videos of, thousands of ballistic missiles coming from, say it's the Gaza or Iran or vice versa. And I'm not taking any sides either way, but it's an amazing technology that had they not invested in that, Israel would not exist, as terrible as that sounds, right? But because of, where it's geographically located and how many, enemies.
They're shooting thousands of rockets before this conflict, constantly shooting rockets into like civilian areas.
Yeah. So. And that ballistic dome, and it's like, why don't we have that technology? And yeah, we are blessed by geographically where we're located, right? But still, yeah, you're talking. I didn't know about that satellites, and so
well, that's now like the new cutting edge portion of that on the news side is like China already has armed satellites. So and it's like, well, where are they? So now you got to track them, and then there's going to be battles between satellites.
We might Star Wars.
Wow, yeah.
So it is going to get weird, and then but Elon's technology, and that's why I think there's a cool dynamic happening within Trump and Elon, and then the Space Force is Elon has the ability to, like, I think he's like 10x what the rest of the world is capable of putting into space. So like he is, by reutilizing rockets and landing the rocket back onto the base where it took off from, that like sets a whole new capability on our turf. So Trump understands the importance of like not losing that technology to the rest of the world. And I think that's really cool.
I was watching an interview and they were talking about Elon leaving California, right? And he didn't get a call from Gavin Newsom, like no contact. And I think that, I think you see some like interesting things, speculation, and just people kind of mocking Trump for his relationship with Elon Musk. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, this is one of the modern pioneers, I think, the guy's obviously special. And why wouldn't we take advantage of that? Like any other country, if they had, a Nikola Tesla or whoever, like just some amazing inventor, it would be taking advantage of that. Celebrated. Like America should be taking advantage of the fact that Elon's here. Elon's here doing Tesla and SpaceX and all these cool things that are like really cutting edge. That's a huge deal for us. And I want to see that. I want more Elon Musks, not less. Like let's have more people come up that are special. He might be a once in a generation kind of guy, but I feel like there's more Americans that might inspire, like he might inspire the next people, and we should reward that.
Elon now is like on the center stage trying to help this country go to the next level.
He's got a biography. It's a little bit older now, but it's a wonderful read. I couldn't put it down, and you'll learn a lot of really interesting things about him and like his whole idea. Like this guy's dead set on going to Mars, and that kind of influences his whole paradigm on the world. It's a pretty interesting guy.
We covered all these, so let's go to number 11. I think this is important. Rebuild our cities, including Washington, D.C., making them safe, clean, and beautiful again. Yeah. Love this.
Gosh, there's been, it just makes me cringe to think about sending money throughout the world in the hundreds of billions of dollars and then, not reinvesting money back into these cities that are booming. It's like, it's just so silly. And then if you take it just back to the baseline of federal government, it's like, we shouldn't wait for wars and conflicts to produce this growth and continue to move innovation forward in all the technologies and all the defense mechanisms, but then also the infrastructure, the water pipes, the electrical infrastructure. Supposedly, like I put a backup generator on my house because as soon as everyone plugs in their Tesla, we're going to break stuff. It's just silly. Like, what are we doing?
Where's all the money going? Like you guys know, I drive a sports car, stiff suspension. And I was driving through La Jolla and I was worried about my car. Yeah. In La Jolla, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the world. Like what's going on?
Like where's the pride of ownership with the people that are in charge of the spending?
Right. Well, it's one of the first things we do when we acquire a community.
Is the streets.
Yeah. Right.
Very high net worth area. The taxes that are being drawn from there have to be astronomical. It's like
or get rid of the damn fees so that entrepreneurs can come in and build, approve construction. Don't make it a nightmare to build something and charge a crazy amount of money for permits. Yeah. Like get out of the way and let people come in and do stuff.
They're ruining all incentive to do something
we'll build
productive.
Into code and standards and safety measures. Sure. But get out of the way.
Yeah, we have a situation. I won't get into too much detail on what utility and what jurisdiction it is, but it's a very big project. It directly affects the net operating income of one of our assets. Had an engineer who we've worked with many times. He's gotten us over the finish line on capital jobs, puts together a plan. We take it out to bid, get a legitimate construction guy, a general contractor who specializes in this utility process, submit to the local municipality. Everything, all green lights, work with the local producer of the energy, and we get the permit. Well, right before we start work, the permit gets pulled, which I've never heard of before. If you get an issued permit, like we were like, hey, you guys are good to go. Here's the permit. Here's your permit number. Rock. And it gets pulled, and basically they misread the plan, and they have a bunch more things that they want to add to it. And are considering potentially halting the job entirely because they're saying that it doesn't meet a specific grandfathering clause. Bottom line is we're trying to improve 75-year-old infrastructure on private property and spend a lot of money, probably $500,000 on this job. who else is going into low income neighborhoods and putting in that type of resource into infrastructure and to have like a local bureaucracy? It's already been checked. It already has an engineer. It has like, everyone's like, here's how you do it. And we're still having issues with it.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's crazy.
And I think, one of my passions, just like, the only thing I would say that on this topic is like homelessness, right? So I, involved in that, and I was a former youth homeless. And I think to your point, it's so upsetting to see all the, support and funding that goes outside of our borders, and it's not getting directly impacted into our cities. And that's why you have things like the opioid crisis and depression. It's a lack of opportunity. It's a lack of investment that's going into these neighborhoods, into these cities. And, where you give people lose hope, and then they have to turn to other things. And then, that mom or that dad that suffers that addiction, that spreads through the entire family. It goes through the kids, grandkids, whatever that is. And so, I'm super passionate on being able to hopefully, if we can start, there's so many amazing cities out there. And it's like, if we can start to invest back into these cities and provide opportunity.
Totally.
So let's get people in there that can actually take it on and clean it up and move on.
Yep.
Because then it'll come back.
Something that we see in the mobile home parks that we manage is we'll go in, and covenant enforcement obviously was not a priority to the previous owner. And we are just doing this right now in Tucson, and had a really great example of, we literally, it was a little over 100 space community, and we basically threatened 40 residents with eviction because they were really in rough shape. I think 6 of the 40 were like legitimate hoarders, overflowing junk. Everyone but one person cleaned up. So we had one legal action against one person. And what ends up happening is everyone else in the community starts picking up. And also, that there's a percentage of people in there, maybe 25%, 30%, that did take care of their stuff. And imagine the change, like how much better they feel. So I feel like that's something that I think would be really interesting to see what would happen. What would happen if a couple cities in America that are great became excellent, and we saw like they flourished? I'm sure we're already seeing that in Florida. Maybe that will be replicated in some of these other places.
Yeah, you see it on a micro scale every single day, right? And so I think that, and these are real Americans in our communities. And I think you just roll that up broadly, and it works on a macro or a larger scale the same way. It's what do they call it? The broken window theory, right? New York, when they cleaned up New York, I don't know, in the 80s or 90s. It's like the same theory, and I couldn't agree with you more. But yeah, you're seeing it on the, on the smaller, but these are, how many people live in one of our communities on average?
It depends. It was a family community, 100 spaces. I would say probably average a family of 400 people live in that community.
Right.
And it really is amazing when you come in and you take ownership of like the common areas, all the stuff we mentioned, and you kind of cast that living standard. Everyone wants to be a part of it, and we're not forcing it. And it's like, hey, we'll bring on these big dumpsters so that you can throw away stuff that you've had on the side yard forever that you just didn't want to pay to dump. We'll make it easy to clean up, and then everyone gets back to a baseline, and it's amazing from there what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. Easier said than done, but I don't know if these tariffs kind of counterdict that a bit.
No, tariffs are just another tool. So I think really it goes back to trusting the conversations that Trump has with all these other leaders.
That's a good point.
I like through him on these different interviews in Rogan and different things that Trump went on to. I listened and he alludes to it a lot. But what I wanted a couple of times, I'm like, just tell everybody what you really think about it. Building relationships is really where it all comes from. And
trusting, like basically backing what you're saying too, like being true to your word.
True, honest person with your word, that if Trump goes and has a meeting with anybody in the world, that he's going to do what he said he's going to do.
Yeah.
Versus like some weird schemey character. And I feel like there's a chance that the like short term kind of everyone jumping off the boat of wanting to have the reserve currency be the dollar, it could maybe be firmed up now. The dollar's still good. We're still trustworthy. Hey, after the whole war in Russia and Ukraine, hopefully that gets settled sooner rather than later. Then we can repair the damage of the financial implications of us capturing their foreign exchange currency with us within the dollars. Like there's just a lot of stuff that could be repaired on the relationship front, you know?
I think, I'm not sure how it works. Maybe you guys know. How did they pass the all of the sanctions on Russia and during the Ukraine conflict? Was that through executive action or was that through Congress?
Executive action.
I think that
it could be a combination of both, but they do it by what Blake's saying is just if we have their dollars, right, then we just freeze those assets. We don't allow them to trade in US dollars on global markets. And so that's really what it is. Not like we're impacting anything on their borders, but it's the global trade that we can then essentially freeze because of everything's US dollar denominated.
That I totally know that. What I'm getting at though is I feel like a lot of countries started thinking differently about America when we seized all these Russian assets and when we started affecting their currency. And so I feel like that's one of those situations where we should maybe Trump should pass a law or work with Congress to pass a law where it requires a Senate majority to impose sanctions. That way it's not just something done willy-nilly. And also, I do think becoming the primary energy producer for the world, if we start accessing our oil reserve and start producing oil, I mean, ultimately, all of Europe's basically buying oil from Russia and from the Arabs. And so if we end up being a competitor for that, I think that we're going to see more competition on against that, and we'll start to see the dollar close out more, like, because that's what's happening right now. The BRICS nations are able to close out their oil transactions with the Emirates and with the Saudi Arabia. It's like,
they're forming a settlement system outside of the dollar altogether. That's then going to be basically they settle in each other's currencies to the degree, I just read a big thing on it, to the degree that it's equal. If it's not, so like if there's a trade difference in, like, they're going to end up with the other country's currency because they provided more value than the other, then they can buy gold.
So how, this is obviously on his plan.
Yep.
Agenda 47. How do you think Trump counteracts that?
Does it talk about it, how he wants to?
Yeah.
So what does it say?
It just specifically says that he wants to continue to make the dollar the
I think it's just
world's
on the
reserve
agenda
currency.
list.
Got it.
Yeah.
So he's obviously going to be working
You have
on
to
that.
repair the relationship damages that were done by seizing those assets.
Yeah.
And so
That's
that's
what
why
you guys said. Yeah, I think that.
I mean, and I'm trying to find if they approved it with any like vote. I think it was a part of like a NATO decision, which is just funny, right? Like it should have been an American decision exclusively.
And
So
it should be Senate. That's what I'm saying. Make that a law so that every country knows we cannot impose tariffs on your currency or sanctions on your currency unless we have a 60% majority Senate vote. I mean, that's the way it should be.
I don't even think it was sanctions. It was seized. You know what I mean?
No, but we imposed. I know for a fact we imposed a ton of sanctions on the Russians, and it didn't affect them.
Well, right, but isn't that different than seizure? You know,
Yeah,
sanctions is one move.
But the sanctions affect the monetary policy of that country.
Right.
Like if you go into the way that the sanctions work, it's basically doing that.
It's cutting off the trade of
Yeah.
that, whatever that sanction is against.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
But we had like 600 billion of their money and we just took it.
Yeah, I think that we should make it he should pass a law that requires Senate 60%, because we might end up facing some really terrible threat, in the future. And it's like, make a valve so that countries feel more comfortable that, the next person in office doesn't just willy-nilly decide to do that.
He would have to do something to that level, because I think it's one of those, you can't put it back in the bottle, like it's been done now and it's been exercised. So maybe Trump makes him feel warm and fuzzy, but unless he puts something that would make it more challenging to do again, they're probably going to continue to operate out of the US dollar.
Yeah.
So I think the baseline then goes back to our performance, our ability to control our internal budget, and like make our production machine so much better to where our economy is white hot and growing in the right direction, and it's under budget. We're paying down the debt. We shouldn't have to be having debt to all the different countries in the world.
The vast majority of our debt is actually to the American taxpayer. So if we can resolve that through economic growth, that's really like, if you're looking at your balance sheet and you're a business person, the first thing you do is you go, where's our biggest debt and how do we resolve that? And so that'll be interesting to see what he does, because that's the inflection point. That's the point where you take 35 trillion and make it smaller. Not, I think that there's a lot of things, especially, there's some oddities that happened during COVID with, our government being forced to be shut down. How does that affect debt? So anyways, but I do think it's through, basically the US taxpayer, like that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of U.S. taxpayers, number 14 is fight for and protect Social Security and Medicare with no cuts, including no changes to the retirement age. I think this one's actually pretty great, and I know we're capitalists, but one thing that I, am pretty worried about is the retirement crisis in the United States and the fact that so many people do not have enough money to live off of, and they kind of banked on this Social Security promise that's really a supplement. It's not geared and wasn't supposed to be created for you to live off of. But I think that we do need to keep a promise to the American people. And this kind of goes back to, what we kind of were talking about on investing. I think it's, ultimately the right thing to do. And the fact of the matter is that if we cut Social Security and we cut Medicaid, like, we're going to have we're going to increase the homeless population. One thing that's kind of interesting, which is, that I'll leave you guys with, and I don't want to talk too much about it, but like going back to my work with the homeless crisis, did you know that the senior population is the fastest growing homeless population in the United States? And 9 out of 10 seniors that become homeless while being seniors is the first time they've ever become homeless.
Wow.
So,
it's really sad.
it's very brutal. It's brutal.
Yeah.
No, I don't think that's even, is it on the chop block at all?
No, he wants to extend it and not cut it.
Fix
Right?
It should be dealt with in the whole picture.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the government in the long haul has just been inflating away from that being as big of a cost, but they never squared up on it.
Yeah.
You got to square up on it and make sure, like, run it more like an endowment.
Yeah,
exactly.
You got to take care of this money so it spits off enough interest and growth to take care of the people that are paid in and need it. And then it should be reorganized to where, like, we don't get it.
Exactly.
Or whatever.
No, I
whatever
think
the solution is.
Yeah.
I never thought for a minute that I'll ever see a dime from Social Security.
Yeah. I think, but yeah, I don't know.
Right.
But I agree with
it.
you. I think that, like, younger people now, like, we should pay into it to whatever extent, get it reorganized, but we should not be expecting that we are going to get it. But there are a lot of folks that did, and now they're retiring and they live off of it. And so I just think it would explode the senior homeless crisis if we just cut ties and said, all right, this was a sham and we can't afford it and it's cut off. I think it would create unexpected problems that we wouldn't even be thinking about.
I agree with you on a couple parts of this, but in general, I disagree. It's been accessed, it's bankrupt, and what ends up happening, the largest demographic in the U.S. is seniors. It's we're having the greatest generation, the great generation. They're all retiring, and ultimately, the care and facilitation of their needs is now going to be the burden on the taxpayer. And that taxpayer and taxpaying group that's working is a smaller group. So I think that this kind of thing is going to stem more fiscal issues. That being said, I agree. If you paid into it, you should get it.
Well, they need to put the money back then.
They need to put the money back.
Like, if they took the money out, that's my point, is you got to hit this square and figure it out. Because if they took all the money and sent it to Ukraine, that was really stupid.
That was.
Whatever they
sent it all over the place. But ultimately, I think that this is Trump. There were a couple things that he did during this election cycle where he was like, this is not the hill I'm going to die on. There's a lot of things that are more important. And this is obviously a contentious issue. No politician comes out and says, we're going to cut government programs that help the poor and needy.
But it's not just about a cut. It's about solving this massive pledge to the American population and then changing it on, like, for us, like for the future generation. Hey, the taxes are going to be fair. As the controlling government interest on the IRS and how the tax money flows through, we're going to take a chunk and make sure that these people that paid in are taken care of. But it has to be dealt with fully, right? Versus just continuing to pay at that deficit.
I know, but when we touch this, that's basically what he's saying. He's like, we're not going to touch it I'm going to focus on other things. That's what's happening with Trump.
It is sort of, so he's not saying he's going to stop. He's just going to throttle up the engine first. And then
exactly.
No,
come back
he
to that.
specifically is saying he's not going to touch it at all.
Well, I mean, hey, if you build an economy and the tax revenue and everything
And they're
improves,
paying in.
it's a lesser problem then.
Right.
And it is sort of like kryptonite if you touch that. And he only has 4 years, so it's like, what do you want him to focus on?
Yeah,
Totally.
no, I agree.
Totally.
I agree.
Yeah.
I disagree with Social Security. It from its origin point,
Correct.
right?
Yes,
and so
yes.
I feel like, I forgot.
Especially when they're going to inflate the shit out of the dollar.
Right. I think the stat may have changed, but I know within the last 5 years, the average American retires with $36,000 in the bank account.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
insane.
So $36,000 and a plan to collect, $1,500 a month from the government.
If you're
is
lucky,
a ter-
1,500.
It's a terrible plan,
It's a
right?
terrible plan.
And so
Yeah.
I think that we've, created this. It's a bad habit, really, is what it is. Like, it's bad decisions, and
The
not
concept of this retirement in general, then set aside that, but then you're going to retire on Social Security only,
Mhm.
as a plan.
Well,
It's
35
bad.
grand in the bank.
That's insane.
It's a
Insane.
bad plan.
Back in the day, you stuck your money in the bank. What happened? It grew,
Yeah.
right? And that's the generation that grew up
But
on
that
that.
takes us back to gold
Okay.
because the
Oh,
currency was back.
I want to talk about a silver gold that you keep really blocking me right now, right? Like, what I want to say is right now, you're not getting a ton of money having it stuck in the bank. So something that we offer is you need to be making money on your money period, right?
Your money
And
needs
so-
to be working for you.
So yeah, you can do it in gold,
100%.
but we like low
No,
income
I'm
housing
saying the
and
dollar needs to have a baseline value, or you're better off in our real estate assets.
yeah, and right now you're better off in our real estate
100%.
assets. And so if you're somebody who, you came to us because one of your friends or family invests with us, we do have a lot of people who are retired and supplement their income and their Social Security through investing with us and basically making money on their money, because right now you can't do that at the bank. So maybe do it in a manufactured housing community with
And
us.
there's lots of avenues to do that. I mean, we're just one avenue, right?
yeah.
And like, there's so many options in different funds or REITs, or, if you Google, how do I get my money in real estate? Like the sheets.
Comfortcapital.com.
Yeah, we are one very good option, but like the return is there. And then something else to kind of like, we're all fairly young today. And, a lot of people, tied to your point, do plan to retire and need this source of income. The younger you can like start to do this, the compound effect of this really starts to add up. And so like that is a key component, because, even though people are like, oh, I don't have the money, like some people are getting by today, right? With the inflation going through the roof, like it's a time right now. And even if you could, put $1,000 a year, like $5,000 a year, pick a number where you can save $50 a month or whatever it is. And little by little, make that grow. In 10, 20, 30 years, it really makes a big impact. So I don't know. I
Huge
just wanted
impact.
to throw that out there.
Yeah. And, I think we've gotten it through the Tony Robbins organization, but there's that story of a city bus worker
Mm-hmm.
who was like making like kibbles and bits. And he was putting, I think it was like 15%, it might have been 20% of his paycheck every single month
Yeah.
into this compounding interest, I think just in the S&P 500.
Okay.
And he ended up retiring with like millions.
Yeah.
And so, we're not telling you need to put 20% of your paycheck in, but there needs to be some forethought on.
Utilize compound interest and hedging for inflation by running up average 8 to 9% if you just put it in a simple ETF or whatever those,
Exactly.
iShare S&P 500 is.
Whether it's Trump or Kamala or whoever, one thing is for certain, there's going to be some amount of inflation. And if you start now over time, compounding interest, like Jen said, I think that you're going to be much better than if you stuck 30 grand in the bank account and said a prayer.
Because now, and I'll go back and prop you up on this, because now the dollar is not backed by gold. There's no tie.
Fiat,
and basically the whole world is operating on a fiat currency system in their own countries. You want to hold real assets that are foundational to supporting life. And so if you're forced into this game, economically speaking, when you have to use a fiat currency, then you want to hold assets that are going to rise with inflation and outpace it, but then also pay you a dividend so you can live off of it.
Right.
And that, I'd say, if we want, we could wrap on that. All roads lead to a need for cash flow, baby.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, that's
100%.
really all we're all saying, that same thing, whether it's Social Security, cash flow from investments, and
you need enough
all
cash flow
need it.
to pay all your bills.
Right.
And that's really it. Once you
Yeah.
solve for that, then you keep working on building something.
And
Right.
and I think too, just like to wrap, I think the paradigm shift of the delayed gratification that, that's why a lot of our investors are, they're older than us. They're probably in their 50s to 70s because they get it. They've been around. It's always tough to get that younger generation. And hence why we try to reach out and kind of talk about, cash flow, because it's not very sexy if you tie up 50 or 100 grand and you're getting 400 to $600 a month. It's like, well, why, what if I go put that in crypto and it doubles or triples, or it doesn't make anything, right? Like,
or you need it to support a
and so-
family.
And so it's the compounding of, receiving cash flow day one, right? You like, if it doesn't cash flow, then to me, it doesn't make sense. And we talk about gold, but gold is a different reason why we like that in the portfolio, but you need something that is providing you cash flow. Cause if it cash flow, it means that it makes money. And then as you hold it for longer, the principal balance plus the cash flow increases over time as rents go up or asset prices go up.
Right.
And then when you get time on your side and consistency of reinvesting or allocating more money, you sit back when you're 50 and you're not wondering if I run out of money. You're just saying, well, this is how much cash flow I'm making today. Right. And I feel pretty good about that because I lived in my means. We always live in our means. I don't care how much money you make. If you make $500,000 at some tech software company, I guarantee you live into every single dollar you have because that's just the way we're built. We're consumers. And that's why you need to build up passive investments that cash flow for you. That way you're constantly living within your means, but it's a defense mechanism to hold you through retirement. And if the government can somehow help all these people, if they needed a crutch, but if smart people listen to this podcast, like you should be investing in cash flow producing assets and then take your risk in 5 to 15% of your portfolio, then put your crypto bets or whatever the hell else it is.
Right.
But then you feel confident because you got the ballast of your portfolio covered. You have your nut covered. And then you feel really good about taking that measured risk.
Yeah.
Because you don't need the money, right? It's not like, oh crap, here's my daughter's college fund, right? And you're sweating it. You're making better informed decisions because you're relaxed. The mortgage payment, the bills are taken care of, and then you can make better decisions. So
I actually think
it.
you make better risk. If you're going to, when your nut is covered and now you're going to look at other investments that are higher risk, I actually think you make a better analysis of risk when you have that like safety net over here. You kind of, I don't know.
You also see it for what it is and you don't get caught up in the hype.
And hoping
and
that I need
the emotional response of
the
like,
emotional.
this is going to change my life if I hit the lottery.
Right.
That's not a good place to invest from.
No, it's never. Yeah.
Amen.
Well, cool, guys. This is fun. Thanks for joining us on this week's version of the CashFlow Quest panel.
Until next time.